Welcome to Mortgage Talk 101 here on Super Talk 1270. Time to look behind the numbers. Buying, selling, refinancing. Mortgage Talk 101 addresses real issues in real estate. Now, live from the Super Talk 1270 studios, here's Mortgage Talk 101 host Joe Sheehan.
Or Greg Larson and Dave Floor. Joe is not here today, so
we've got our old. We're the Dakota Housing Network now, but we got our old intro here today. So interesting. Okay, thanks, Joey. Joey's running the show today. Nobody told him we had a new intro, did they?
New news.
All right, no problem. All right.
Well, what a great Thursday with all the moisture that we need. That's $1 million rain on this date, isn't it?
No kidding. Absolutely. It's cold out again, but it's kind of nice when it's
I'll take
a little
that.
wet. Yeah.
Right
now.
So, Dave, what do we got for some rate information?
Well, as we always like to do here on the Dakota Housing Network, mortgage rates from the Freddie Mac survey. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage averaged 3.8% this week. That is, where was it? It's up from last week when it averaged 3.68%, so it jumped up quite a little bit there. A year ago at this time, the 30-year fixed rate was at 4.21. The 15-year fixed rate averaged 3.02%, up from last week when it averaged 2.94, and last year it was at 3.32. The last Monday through Wednesday, really, the rates, this is one time when the survey is correct. It's timely because it's usually a little bit behind the eight ball, but rates have moved up in the last 3 days here. Today it's got a little bit of a bounce back the other way, and they're doing a little bit, but most people were locking earlier this week if you were looking at the market, so it was definitely a time to lock. And right now, according to MBS Highway, our friend Barry Habib there, he is recommending floating it ahead of the jobs report that comes out tomorrow. And they're looking at that. Since rates took a hit this week earlier, they're saying, hey, let's just float and see what that jobs report actually comes out as. Whether it's good or bad, that'll affect which way rates go, if they bounce back down or go back up. So they're recommending floating today ahead of that jobs report tomorrow morning, which will come out, and we'll see if our economy has created any jobs, if it's created more jobs than what the oil fields have lost, I guess, is what'll happen. So
be interesting. Before we go any farther, we should introduce our guest. We have with us Nancy Willis, the Government Affairs Director for the North Dakota Association of Realtors, and my friend. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, Nancy.
Nice to see you.
All right.
We're going to get into the last session and some of the things that happened with real estate there. Before we do, though, I got to tell you, we have this friend of ours named Elliot Eisenberg. He's an economist who puts out information, and every day he puts out a 70-word blog statement. Today's is really interesting. It says, while the home ownership rate slipped to a 26-year low of 63.8% in the first quarter, it's now falling for the right reasons. Rather than dropping as homeowners become renters, it's falling because there are hordes of new people in the entering the household market. So
they're primarily new renter households, I guess.
New
right?
renter and buyer households. So
Okay.
That percentage will go. But between the first quarter of 14 and 15, 1.5 million households were formed. And between the fourth quarter of 14 and 13, 1.7 million new households were formed, which is a far cry from the household formation rate of 500,000 since 2007. So obviously, home ownership is dropping because A, there's a whole lot more people looking for homes, and B, we probably don't have enough homes to sell right now in some
Well,
markets.
when they look at this, then there's more people renting, so the rate of home ownership is going to go down because there's more rental units being rented. Yeah, is it comparison? Okay, so basically, a lot of kids are moving on to the parents' basements.
Sounds like it. Yep.
Yeah,
The boomerang boys are going away.
Or parents moving out of the kids' basements.
That would be it.
Too. Yeah. Okay. All right.
There was a survey that was recently done by the National Association of Realtors that looked at the demographics of home ownership. And even though they talked about how a lot of kids are moving out of basements or moving out of wherever into rentals, that a little bit later down the road when they're deciding to have kids or they want to grow up, they are buying houses. And like 32% of the houses that are being bought by millennials. So I think that what Greg said is right. We're going to have to make sure there's inventory there for those people when they decide
absolutely.
to buy houses.
It's a huge group of people in that age group, and they're going to want to buy a house at some point in their life. So,
and it's interesting, just real quick, how cyclical this is. You talk to demographers, and people are talking about millennials, younger folks, and what kind of houses they want to buy. They want the loft downtown. They want, inner city. They want compact little houses, and that's true right up until they have kids, and then they want to have a bigger house downtown, or they want to get out into a suburb in a city, or get into a neighborhood in a setting more like North Dakota. Isn't that the way it always is? I mean, it's a cyclical deal, and some people are talking like it's really new news.
Yeah.
It always happens that way.
Yeah.
That downtown, inner city, it's a great place to live if you're retired, if you're single, or if you're married without kids.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we have kids, we want more room, we want better schools, we want this.
Yeah.
So it's a interesting churn how that works, and the more it changes, the more it stays the same.
There's a commercial on TV now, and I saw it last night on watching the news, and it's this guy, and I think it's an insurance company commercial. I can't remember what the commercial's for, but the guy says, "I'm never getting married."
Yeah.
He's with his buddies, and then
That is an insurance
he's
commercial,
proposing, and then we're never moving on to the suburbs. And then he sees somebody drive by in a van, and there they are. He's washing his van in his suburban house. And then what's the next one? They're on a
having
plane.
more kids.
We're never having a kid, and then we're not having more kids. I'm pregnant.
Yep. And we see the same deal in Fargo. Fargo did this about 10 years ago. Big push to develop downtown Fargo. It was very successful. A lot of young professionals living there. If you look at the houses for sale and residences for sale and condos for sale, there's always something for sale there as people move through that phase. And now we're talking about it in Bismarck.
Yeah.
We want to develop downtown, young professional homes and stuff, and that's all good because it all starts the whole movement.
Yeah. No, and we're doing something, a plan similar to Fargo. Fargo, NDSU has moved their campus downtown, or a campus downtown, and if this Fifth Street project goes through in Bismarck, isn't you and Mary talking about it?
Yeah, expanding their downtown
campus down there.
Yeah.
So we're following that same trend.
Yeah, we sure are.
Yeah.
Well, we're headed towards a break. When we get back, Nancy, we're going to talk about what you did just to keep busy during this session, because I know you just sat around and ate bonbons most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time.
Most of the time. That's what happened, right? And Dave, you were involved in it, so
Okay.
we'll take a look at it. Talk to you later. And we are back. This is Greg Larson, along with my co-host Dave Fleur and our special guest, Nancy Willis. So, Nancy, the legislature just ended. It was very busy for you, I'm sure. Can you give us a highlight of some of the big issues that realtors were concerned about this year?
I think I'll start by letting our listeners know that the realtors, one of the things we look out for is property owner rights and, of course, homeowner rights. So we're always looking for things that will affect that. We had 9 bills this year that we strongly supported. The first one was one that we introduced ourselves, and that was one that clarified that where there's a dispute with earnest money, it can be heard in small claims court in the location in which the property is located. In the past, it has to be heard in the location where the property owner resides, and that can be an issue if the property owner is out of state. A lot of people just won't pursue getting their earnest money back because of that. The legislature did amend it slightly to say that if both parties agree to another location, that can happen as well. And that was a bill that passed, so of course we were happy about that. Other bills that we strongly supported were the appropriations for the Housing Finance Agency and the Housing Incentive Fund, and I think Dave can talk a little bit more about that. We also strongly supported appropriation for the State Water Commission and their water projects. There are a lot of water projects going on in the state right now, and as you know, water is important to everyone. And for us, especially the Fargo Diversion Project, and there was legislation this session that allowed for appropriation for internal diking in Fargo. the Federal Emergency Management Association, well, FEMA, they provide flood insurance, subsidized flood insurance, and they do mapping every few years. And recently, new maps came out in Fargo, which included a lot more households that they considered to be at risk for flooding. So this internal diking program could really help some of those homeowners see a reduction in their insurance payments, or even allow them to not have to have flood insurance if that's possible. And that, we hope, would be a shorter-term solution than the diversion project, which still is a long ways off.
Can you talk about that? Because obviously
Sure.
with our agency, we had quite a few homeowners now in Fargo that were affected by
Sure.
that, where we've got their loans and they had to get the flood insurance. So this internal, that was funded, so there's funds available for Fargo to undertake this in those neighborhoods. So then that
Correct.
some homes could get off the rolls for flood insurance.
That was the purpose for the internal diking program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To hope-
that and to keep a bunch from coming on.
Coming on.
Right.
Okay.
With the new flood map, the number that hits my head is like 2,000 new homes will be required to have flood insurance.
Yep.
Yep.
And they're saying they will be remapping before 2020, and that will bring, as I recall, another like 2,500 homes on.
Into it.
So
Okay.
that's a chunk of homes.
Did you know if Fargo has a timeline on when they would start that, or?
I know that there was an emergency clause on the bill, and in the city folks that testified, they'd like to start it as soon as possible.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Okay. Good to know. Yeah.
yeah, so that was a big victory, I think, for the city of Fargo and for everyone that was supporting that. We had some changes in our real estate licensure regulations. Previously, in order to change the date for license renewal, it had to be done through statute. That was changed so that now it can be done by administrative rule by the Real Estate Commission, which makes more sense. So it gives them more flexibility if they need to make a change in that. So rather than December 31st, which it is now, it looks like it'll be November 15th. That same bill also changed the penalty for unlicensed activity for those individuals that are out there that say that they're real estate agents and that, might not be. It used to be an infraction if that was the case. Now it's a Class B misdemeanor. So it just puts a little more teeth for the commission to be able to regulate that.
How often does that happen?
It didn't used to happen a lot, but with all the activity on the western side of the state, with all the oil activity, I think they talked about when they did the testimony that they had like 15 individuals that they were pursuing some kind of action toward.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's just some of those things have just increased because of more out-of-state interest in North Dakota.
And the ones that pay the penalty of that are the people who buy and sell the homes.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
They get nailed with fraud. It can get very expensive. There are a couple of horror stories out there.
Yeah. Wow.
The other thing we supported were a couple of changes to contractor regulation, and similarly, there's one bill now or one piece of legislation that passed where, again, there are stronger penalties for those individuals that start a project and never finish it, or people pay them money and they never even start the project. So, again, that's going to be helpful for those people that, unfortunately have had problems with that. We supported a legislation that increases abstractor fees, and somebody out there might say, well, why would you want to support anything that increases fees? But abstractors hadn't had an increase in their fees for a very long time, and those same fees are used to hire abstractors. There's a need for more abstractors, so that was important for us that, they be able to get additional dollars. The appraisal board, the North Dakota Real Estate Appraiser Qualifications and Ethics Board, they used to have reciprocity with other states if there were appraisers coming in from other states to work here. They no longer have to have that because there's actually a national database where they can go in and look to see if there have been any complaints or any issues against appraisers in other states.
Oh, okay.
So that was removed from the statute. And then there also was, in that same legislation, allowing for if there's a complaint against an appraiser, but the board finds that there really is no merit to it, that it can be an allegation. Right now, it would all have to be listed as a complaint. And for some of those individuals, when they go to get their professional insurance, they have to list that they've had a complaint against them, even if it was dismissed or it really turned out not to be anything. Mm-hmm. So that's helpful for them. Another piece of legislation allowed closing agents at or prior to closing to accept cashier's checks for loans And there's some parameters there. It has to be contiguous counties, and there's some other parameters. But that also helps, during the closing process. There were 2 bills that we were strongly supporting that failed. One of them was the anti-discrimination bill that I think got a lot of notice, of course, that would have added sexual orientation as a protected class to employment relations, public accommodations, housing, state and local government services, and credit transactions. The reason we supported that is because we already do that in our code of ethics as realtors, and so we really didn't see why that shouldn't be the same, in North Dakota and for all of those services that I've talked about. And then there was one that was kind of a little confusing to people, but what we were hearing was that in some areas, county auditors are requiring that when there's a transfer of deed where there hasn't been platting done in the past, that needs to be platted. There was a lot of concern from especially property owners, farmers, that adds additional cost that's unnecessary. And so the bill would have said that auditors can't require that they can actually use meets and bounds. And what meets and bounds descriptions are those descriptions that if you go back and look at your own title that talks about, walking so many paces over to the rock on the corner and next to the tree. And actually, those are kind of neat, but auditors want to get away from using that.
Sure.
And we felt like they should still be able to be used if there was no reason why they shouldn't be used. But that did not pass.
Okay.
The auditors convinced the legislature that things have to be modernized, and
Okay.
Legislators agreed with them.
So no more 10 steps to the
Well,
Red Rock.
If you're not selling any property, it'll
Yeah.
stay there for a while. But
Yeah.
as things go forward, those are going to be
So
modernized.
our abstracts and property descriptions just won't be as colorful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they'll still be there, but they
Yeah.
won't be using them.
Yeah,
You know?
okay, all
So
right.
yeah, I think it's kind of sad myself, but. And then we were watching all the property tax and other tax bills, and taxpayers should be very happy that there was $274.2 million in property tax cuts and $123 million in individual and corporate tax reductions. So again, taxpayers benefited this session. So it was an interesting session, I think, as everybody discussed it. It was a very business-like, session. A lot of tax bills, a lot of business bills, and of course the price of oil hanging over everything. But
Yeah.
some people felt it wasn't as exciting a session as in some years in the past, where there's one big issue that sort of
Yeah.
gets everybody excited. So,
Well, boring is probably okay.
yeah, I think
maybe.
so. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes boring's right up until the last couple of days. Then
And
it
they
got
didn't
fun.
finish.
No, they
Technically,
left.
there's a bill out there, so that is kind of exciting. What are they
Yeah,
gonna,
and
what's
I think
gonna
that's
happen
the
with
first
that?
time that's ever happened. Everyone you talk to
I
can't
don't-
ever remember a session.
I remember the governor saying he can't remember that
No,
ever happening.
I don't
so,
either.
yeah.
And in this case, it really is one of those examples where both sides, the Senate and the House, know that there's an issue with public employees and they want to protect them, they want to look out for them, and they just have two totally separate philosophies on how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it'll get resolved. And so that's where we're going.
So overall, for the realtors, a good session.
Overall, it was a very good session for
Happy
us.
with it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we were happy with it.
Okay.
And I think for taxpayers and homeowners, it was a good
Yeah.
session.
Yeah. You can have the debate about the property tax thing and how that works and
Yep.
if it's the proper thing because actually it's using state dollars to give relief to the locals. But how else are you going to handle this? I guess is really the question.
Yeah, and I should point out that the prime sponsor of the one bill that the realtors introduced was someone who I kind of know
Do you?
fairly well. Yeah.
You
Who
sleep
would
on
that
the,
be?
Mostly I
sleep under
call her
the same
Honey.
roof?
Yeah, we do.
Same roof,
Yeah.
and you call her Honey.
We share dinner.
A little familiar there,
Yeah,
Greg.
well,
with
that's true.
with your legislator.
Yeah, I vote for my wife. I just got to tell you that.
If I could vote for her, I would, but she's not in my district. So, anyway, and when we get back, if anybody has any questions, 663-1270 for our guest Nancy or Greg, and if you have a question for me, I don't know why, but go ahead. But, and then we'll talk. Maybe you want to talk about the housing incentive fund a little bit. I can give the bare bones on it, since our agency at North Dakota Housing is the one that gets to administer that. So, all right, we'll be back on the Dakota Housing Network.
On Super Talk 1270.
And we are back on the Dakota
Housing Network.
Housing Network. I stumbled over that one, didn't I?
Yeah,
Thank you, Dave.
way to go, Greg.
Here with Dave Fleur, and I'm not Greg Larson, making mistakes like that.
No.
And we're here with Nancy Willis. And Nancy, we're going to talk a little bit about HIF right now, which is?
The Housing Incentive Fund.
Yeah.
And maybe I can have Dave start and just give us a real base description.
Actually, the Housing Incentive Fund was created by the legislature, in 2011, I believe was the first year.
I think
right?
that's correct, yeah.
And it was a way to help promote affordable housing in the state of North Dakota due to the oil boom at the time. And, as rents, it's focused on rental housing. And it was, because of the increase in cost in rents in the western part of the state primarily, but now it's really, affected the rest of the state. I mean, it's a statewide issue. The legislature created this, and they've given various amounts of funding. It's mainly been through tax credits that people, the four of us in this room, could invest in this housing incentive fund and receive a state income tax credit. And that's primarily been where the funds have come from. So it's come from the public contributing to the fund and then getting a tax credit in return that they can take off their income tax annually. But this year the legislature provided for $30 million of income tax credits, and that can be individuals or companies. Banks, oil companies have been a heavy contributor to it. The banks have been wonderful in contributing money to it, and then just the individuals in the state have been wonderful contributing to this. And then we have there's $5 million, I believe, that is being transferred from the Bank of North Dakota profits to the fund. And if the Bank of North Dakota realizes a profit of $130 million by the end of 2015, then they will kick in another $5 million. So it'd be a total of 40, which I think is good. Last go around we got 30. So potentially kicking it up 10 total, but we have an opportunity for at least $5 more million than there was before. But the majority of the money does have to be raised through the tax credits. So the Housing Finance Agency will be going out and basically fundraising over the next few months to let people aware that these tax credits are available and to invest in these housing projects. And people can designate. They can say, hey, I'm going to make a $1,000 contribution and I want it to go to this community. I want it to go to Tioga, or I want it to go to Dickinson or Stanley or wherever it might be. So you can have a little control over where your money is going to be used, which is a nice feature of the credit, I think. But I'm not the specifics on how many units it's created over the last 4 or 5 years. I don't have that. I think we're actually looking at. I talked to Jennifer Anderson, who runs the program for our agency, about coming on the show in the next couple of weeks, and we can talk in more detail about it. And she's the expert. I'm on the home ownership side, so I know what's going on, but I don't know the details. So,
and I would really encourage people out there. I think it's a really good investment.
Yeah.
And I know we have a lot of realtors that invested in that fund.
Yeah. You're still paying. You're still paying the tax, but at least you're directing where your tax dollar is going to go, in essence, rather than having it just go into the general fund and it's wherever it goes. This way, at least you can say, hey, I want it to go for housing, or I want it to go for this particular project, which is a unique feature of it that you don't usually get to direct where your income tax dollars go.
I think that people that are out there, too, listening to our program, we know that there are still a lot of individuals that need affordable housing. Yeah. One of the discussions that came out in committee when we were requesting these funds and supporting the Housing Finance Agency for them was there was a lot of talk about things maybe improving and maybe not the need for this not so much anymore. So I would say that if you're in communities where you know there is a need for affordable housing, which we know there is, be sure that you're talking to your legislators even when it's not in session, because they need to know that this is a need that continues to exist.
Yeah, you did the right thing by passing the appropriation for the fund and stuff, yeah.
One of the things I really like about this program is that it doesn't create an apartment building that is 100% low-income housing.
No.
What it does is it sets aside a certain percentage of the units in that apartment building for low income or reduced rate, but the others are normal, they're regular rates, so it's a real incentive for investors because they can still realize a profit without needing a subsidy. So it really is a real boon for that. And some of the places that we've seen it go all over the state, like you said, but out west, there's a manufacturer out there who had some entry-level people who couldn't find housing, and so he built an apartment house for the public, Kildare Manufacturing, and he kept a certain percent of them back for people who were in his industry or law enforcement or education so they could have a place to live and get started. And that's a kind of a different wrinkle that you don't see in most affordable housing programs.
Yeah, and there's been, a couple of the oil service companies have contributed to it. The gentleman that's been in the business forever, he's out of Belfield. I can't think of the name of his company now, but he contributed a good chunk to his fund, I think, and there's a project in Belfield where obviously his workers would be living. And I think Marathon Oil has contributed to it, and the banks have been wonderful. I know Gate City and a couple other ones have all contributed money to it. So it's been it's been a wonderful program, and it's helped a lot in the last 4 years, I believe, with the housing situation. So.
And folks, if you want to get in on this, I'm going to tell you to do it early. We've watched this now for a couple of years, and by mid-December, the first year of the biennium, all the investments have been made.
Yeah,
it comes quick. It all happens in December the first year, so it'll happen in December of 2015.
Yeah, we've had to send checks back.
Yep.
Because people waited till towards the end of December and they threw their contribution, and we already were maxed out on the number of credits we could give, so we had to send checks back to people. So do it early.
So if you're an individual and you like the idea of this and you think you want to make a donation to this and it'll count against your taxes, so really it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
I would do it early. Don't wait, because it will be gone.
Yeah, and if you have questions on it, go to our website, ndhfa.org, or you can call and ask to speak to Jennifer Henderson or probably Jolene Klein, our executive director. And the number's 701-328-8080, or the website at ndhfa.org, and look up the information and ask your questions about it. Maybe find out which projects are out there. If you'd like your designate. I think they're going to be able to do that, is designate where their money would go, which projects. So, but you can find out what the fund has done in the past, and what it looks like going forward this year. What projects are out there? So,
okay.
Yeah.
And we'll have more information on that on a later program.
In the next couple weeks, yep.
Okay. So, Nancy, changing the subject, we are going you and I, to Washington, D.C. next week.
Ooh, good. You guys.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, you're looking pretty important here.
Yeah, I have a tie on today.
You got a tie on.
Because I want to get used to wearing them.
Yeah.
We are going there for the National Association of Realtors spring meeting. They change the meeting of it every year. But this is our point to lobby with the Hill folks. We get together with a lot of the executive branch individuals and talk to them, so it's a big deal for us, and we have some issues that people will be interested in that we're going to be talking about, and so maybe we should get started on a couple of those.
Yeah, I think something for homeowners to know is that we are very concerned about the mortgage interest deduction. There's a lot of discussion on the federal level about doing something with taxes. And one of the things we don't want to see happen is for that mortgage interest deduction to go away. So we'll be talking to our senators and our representative about trying to make sure that stays.
There's an idea out there about a tax credit to replace that. Have you know anything about that? Instead of the interest deduction, there'd actually be a tax credit up to a certain level.
Yeah, there's several ideas floating around. You're talking about the tax credit. I'm not sure that has legs anymore. But it was a tax credit. Instead of being able to deduct the interest that you pay on your mortgage on your income taxes, you won't do that. But there'll be a tax credit levied back to your taxes
For owning a home, basically.
For owning
up
a
to
home.
a certain level. Yeah.
Correct. The issue with that was it's much easier to limit a tax credit and change a tax credit so that, you can get a tax credit if your mortgage is under this much.
Yeah.
Or you can get a tax credit if your home isn't valued over this much.
Okay.
And so it makes it a much more dynamic thing to change. And so that was one actually we talked about a few years ago when we were out there, but I'm not sure that's right now a hot topic anymore.
So the realtors would like to see the mortgage interest deduction stay as is.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
there's also discussion about a flat tax, and the argument that if that happens, everyone's taxes go down, and so you really don't need a mortgage interest deduction. But there are about 75% of homeowners that use that mortgage interest deduction, and for many homeowners, that's pretty substantial for them, and continues, even after they've paid off their mortgage. So, it's a really important incentive, we think, to keep. And it could also cause a drop in, home values if it goes away. So it's a very important piece.
And it's a big point about qualifying for your loan.
Yeah.
You have to consider that when you do your loan payments. So that's one of the areas where we really do look out for the home buyer. And as we're leaving this session, I will say that I'm proud to say that the realtors in this country really are the only serious advocate for home ownership. There is not another association that says that as one of their specific goals. So
Yeah, we're
there.
You have the Mortgage Bankers Association, but they kind of do that, but not to the extent the realtors do. Not at all.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
Another, another big issue we've been following are like-kind exchanges. They want to do away with like-kind exchanges, which allows property owners to exchange property of equal value.
Okay.
And there is a issue that I think we better address when we come back because we're headed to a break. And welcome back to the Dakota Housing Network. How'd I do, Dave? I get it right this time? All right.
Dave Floor here, Mr. Housing, Greg Larson, Nancy Willis. All right. Hey, before we get started on the what you're going to, the big shindig in D.C., you can't make this stuff up. This is in Connecticut.
Okay.
State fraud investigator accused of mortgage fraud.
Well, he should know how to do it.
Yeah. Linwood Patrick. He was arrested Wednesday morning on a charge of wire fraud. Patrick, charged by a new federal anti-corruption task force, was released on a $150,000 bond. He followed a failed effort to establish several income-producing residential properties, according to a bankruptcy he filed. He could not be reached for comment. How about that? I just think that's funny. You can't make that up. No. State fraud investigator.
Accused of fraud.
Well, he's had all those good ideas.
Sure.
Yeah. And he thought, I'm going to...
They just tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
It should work.
Yeah. So anyway, all right, back to D.C. You guys are heading to D.C.
We are.
We
and
are.
you're going to just fix everything, right,
Well,
Nancy? I mean,
We're keeping America safe for homeowners.
Okay, there we go. We'll settle for that then.
Well, we make sure to represent what we think will keep, homeowners safe and represent, of course, the people in North Dakota as well.
Yeah.
It's a great conference. We hear a lot about what's going on the federal level with housing. They give us a lot of demographics and statistics that we can bring back. And we get to visit with our senators and our representative and talk to them about what we think is important for North Dakota homeowners and property owners.
Okay, so we talked about the mortgage interest deduction. We want to keep that as it is. That's important, very important.
Very important.
Okay, and then the next one was what you started
Well, the
on?
one we think is really important, too, are like-kind exchanges, especially in a state like North Dakota that has a lot of rural property. Since 1921, there's a provision, 1031, that allows investment real estate to be exchanged for property of like kind.
And ag
And
is
it's on a
included in
tax-deferred basis. So it's not really not paying taxes. It's just deferring those taxes. they want to take that away. And that's something that we think is really important that needs to be kept. So
that
that's one of
happen a
the
lot?
things.
1031
I think it
exchanges.
happens.
People exchange
Oh, yeah.
property? Yeah.
You see it a lot in people who are investing in homes for rental property.
Yeah, okay.
You know, they'll owe a capital gains tax on this house that they sold, but they can transfer that to a house they're buying. So,
Okay.
in other words, the tax gets put on the new house,
Oh, okay.
and it can move that way. It allows the owner to plan out how these taxes are going to be paid. I mean,
Sure.
they know they owe them. That's not the issue. It's the matter of how they get deferred, so they don't have to pay it in a chunk.
Today.
They can work
yeah.
it out. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And also in ag land, ag land is considered commercial land, so there's opportunities when you're transferring property
Yeah.
family to family to defer that so that it can
family,
be
sure.
handled properly. So it is a big deal, and it's done a lot more than you think it would be. Obviously, you look at the big apartment buildings that are being moved, but it's a lot of duplexes and for-rent homes and that sort of thing.
So this might be a case where somebody doesn't like something that was occurring, that somebody's taking advantage of this, but for the general populace, say us in North Dakota here with ag that have used it
Yeah.
for years,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. It's a nice thing, but somebody's abused it, and now somebody wants to get rid of it.
Clearly, like I said, they're looking at the big buck deals.
Yeah.
And we're looking here in Bismarck. Okay, I own 2 homes that I rent,
Yeah.
and I want to buy another one, and I'm going to sell one to buy another. Capital gains tax or the tax on that. Let's pick a number. It's $5,000.
Yeah.
All right. It's much easier for me to spread that out because I have to have a tenant make the money. It's much easier for me to spread that out, transfer the tax, and spread it out over a period of time than it is to try to recover it from a tenant right away. So it's just a good business model. And so on a large scale, it's huge dollars. On a small scale, it's just a way to be able to afford to keep rental income.
Okay. What else, Nancy?
Well, and then, of course, FHA. A lot of people use FHA mortgages, and, they're subsidized mortgages. And there are a lot of people in Congress right now that just feel that that isn't something that should exist anymore, that there should be private investment, but that the government shouldn't be assisting to subsidize. And so, again, that's been a huge mortgage lender for a lot of people. It's allowed a lot of people to be able, especially to buy their first home. So we continue to support having that available for homeowners.
Yeah, it worked. The FHA's been around since the 30s, I think, and it pretty much worked pretty good until they decided they needed to get back their market share in the mid 2000s and got a little maybe wayward. But you know what?
But they're back
when
in
the
shape again.
Crisis happened in 2008. It's actually a good thing FHA was there.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
there really was a market. Then you could still get home loans, and FHA played a huge role in that. After that happened, if they weren't there, we don't know what would have happened, I guess. But yeah, so
And they're now
it's
back
important.
in the black,
They're doing
so
okay,
they're doing
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So there's no reason. So those are probably the big issues. There's some others too, but those are really the big issues that homeowners and should know about.
We've talked about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac on this show a lot in the last few years, between Joe and I. And, Joe and I have our opinions on it. I think I could speak for him saying, the government should just let them keep their profits now. They've paid them back. Let them keep their profits and get them out of conservatorship and let them go and see what happens. And, let them do their business. And if private capital wants to come back in, super.
Yeah, but the general fund loves that money they're getting.
Exactly. Well, when you get a steady stream of income every month, it's kind of nice not to turn that down, I guess. But
yeah, one of the other big things we're going to talk about there is obviously the flood insurance and what's happening just in North Dakota, but nationwide is a big deal. Some of the dollars that were going to happen, and we get to thank Congressman Kevin Kramer for being one of the co-sponsors of what's called the Flood Insurance Protection Act that they got passed. The Bigger Waters Act, and I don't want to get all namey here, but they passed a bill that said the National Flood Insurance Program has to be financially solvent in a period of time.
Right.
And the only way they can do that is by their rate structure.
yeah.
And so they enacted these rate structures, which were extremely punitive. Personally, I live in a home. I pay $706 a year right now for flood insurance. With the enactment of the Bigger Waters Act, that was going to go to $4,700 a year, more than my homeowner's insurance and property taxes combined. So it was a real treat. So they made a correction in that, and that correction is for a period of time, and so they're still dealing with that. And in the meantime, they're redoing flood rate maps, and so we're seeing what's happening in Fargo. So that's still an item that we're working on and keeping an eye on. And also, just kind of fun, we always have a keynote speaker. I don't know if we're going to get to keep this guy or not as our keynote speaker, because there's some rules in place as to who can speak. But as it stands right now, our keynote speaker is presidential candidate Mike Huckabee.
Oh, okay.
So we don't know if he'll get to stay because he's now a presidential candidate, or if they work that out.
So you'd have to have all the other candidates up to
Well,
speak
that
equal time?
Sure, we'll give them each 5 seconds and walk them through.
Hi, my name is Marco Rubio. And,
That's right, and I think I'm a candidate. So anyway.
And I would say one other issue is that what people have called Waters of the USA, and that's the EPA regulation that would increase regulation on all waters pretty much the way it stands right now. And we're not the only ones that are fighting that. So are a lot of other people, but that's one of our issues too.
That could have a huge impact on the value of like farm ag land, right?
Oh, huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually on that committee.
Okay.
And we have a meeting scheduled, and it's going to.
Well, you wouldn't be able to make decisions on some of the, ponds or that are in your that are right on you, or creeks that are on your property.
Yeah, and it's just because this water, I've got a pothole and it drains into
something that might drain into the river, so now it's considered navigable waters.
Right.
Yeah, so I have this pothole that only fills up when it rains, and that's going to be regulated by the feds.
That's the aim.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, you got to fix that, Nancy. You get there.
Well, Senator Hoban is working on that very diligently,
I cannot
so we
imagine
can thank him for that.
Any of our folks there not saying that's a little ridiculous.
Well, it's and the other thing is, it is not being done at this point by legislation. It's being done by executive order.
That's right. It's the EPA just doing this.
Yeah, so we'll get after that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll come back and complain about other people right after the break.
Oh, we're done.
Is this it?
This is it, Greg.
We're last?
We're done. Joe holds up his finger. 1 minute, he puts his finger up in the air.
Let me take a moment
Well, it's
then
just
to
been
thank.
so much fun. We didn't
That's
realize
it.
Yeah,
how
it goes
fast
by
time has
fast.
gone by.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for being
Thanks.
here.
Welcome.
Dave, thank
All right,
you.
Greg, good to
and
see
we'll
you
see you
again.
next
We'll be
Thursday.
back
Well, I
next
won't,
week.
but we'll be back next
I'll
Thursday.
probably be here. Yeah.
This has been the Dakota Housing Network on Super Talk 1270. Join us again next Thursday morning at 11 a.m. The Dakota Housing Network is heard weekly right here on Super Talk 1270 and online at supertalk1270.com.
ABC News, Super Talk 1270. Accurate news, stimulating talk. This is KLXX AM, Mandan, Bismarck.